In today's video, I'm going to go over the new 2017 Sky Viper S1750 Stunt Drone. I'm going to do an overview of the features, go over the new quad and transmitter, an altitude hold video, flight video, FPV video footage, tips for beginners, and my suggestions to Sky Viper. Okay, I'm going to go over a few of the features right here. First off is VIPER Flight 5. What VIPER Flight is basically the flight controls that are programmed into the S1750. So, improved auto hover. It's definitely improved. I'm going to talk more about it later and I'll demonstrate it. Flyaway failsafe. What that actually means is if there is no input into the transmitter for 10 seconds, the drone is supposed to automatically land. That doesn't mean if it crashes, it's automatically going to shut off. It's just if you don't put any input into the controller. Essentially, that should mean if you've lost signal, that the drone is going to just land. And simplified controls, what that basically means is on the transmitter, you don't have to do some kind of a combination button presses to put it into manual mode. There's a button on the bottom left that you just push that button. Little green light comes up and that tells you that you're in manual mode. Next up is probably the most requested feature and most sought after feature for the previous generation of Sky Vipers is 2 times improved flight range. Now, the flight range is going to vary quite a bit depending on how much interference you've got around you. If you're flying in your neighborhood over other people's houses, which you shouldn't be doing anyway, there's a chance that you're going to lose signal, a greater chance, I should say. Now, if you're out in an open field at a park, there isn't a lot of obstructions, that's generally where you're going to get the most benefit from the improved flight range. So just try to keep that in mind. Fly in a conscientious way and try not to fly out of your own visual sight range if you can help it, because I've put the range on this at least 250 feet. That is plenty enough range for the naked eye. Unless you're an FPV and you've got some good long range FPV goggles and transmitter system, you shouldn't need to fly over 250 feet. Quick swap battery, that's really nothing new, but it's a good choice of battery, mainly just because it uses a JST connector, which is really common, and they don't stick you on a proprietary battery, so that's really good too. Flight assist, auto launch, and land, that's really nothing new. Dual flight modes, that's actually really good. I'm going to talk about it later. But that's the basic stuff. It's got 7mm by 20mm motors. They actually put a sticker over it because they mistakenly, I guess, typoed 8mm motors, which these are not. But there's plenty of kick in them for such a light drone. So that's the basic features. Then let's go to the drone itself and controller and take a look at it. Okay, just going over the new model here, and it has a few cosmetic changes. It has like kind of a rough matte finish, which I kind of like better compared to the old one. It has holes right here, right above each LED, to where when you have it ready to bind and you're binding it, it makes it a little bit easier to tell if the LEDs are flashing or not. The biggest change by far is you now have a port to directly plug the battery into, which is a big improvement over the previous version, because the old one had a female wire coming out right here. You connected it right here, and then you had like this just wire hanging under your drone, which generally hanging wires isn't good. So definitely an improvement. Your stock battery is 650 milliamp hours, which is about double what the previous S1700 got you. So that's definitely a big improvement. This battery can be a little tricky to get in here, but yep. And probably really the biggest change to the new S1750, besides its handling characteristics, is the controller. So This is the previous S1700 controller, and you had a dead throttle stick, and it was in altitude hold, or yeah, altitude hold by default. And to put it into manual mode, you had to hold the stunt button down and hit auto launch, which was fine, but a little bit cumbersome. Anyway, so this was a dead stick, and I have a feeling part of the reason why they changed it to the spring-loaded on the new one is if you didn't have it all the way down, it wouldn't launch. And I have a feeling it was like one of those really kind of newbie-ish technical issues that may have caused a lot of problems and lit up Sky VIPER's tech support line. But anyway, one really big improvement on the new controller is it's actually switchable between mode 1 and mode 2. So if you're Australian or European and you're used to mode 1, you can actually change that, which is kind of world class for such a cheap drone. Anyway, so when you were in altitude hold before, you would push these buttons up and down to raise or lower your altitude. Now, oddly enough, when you're in altitude hold, you just push the button up to go up and down to go down. Kind of funny, but I always put it in manual mode anyway. I just like it better. These lights will light up to tell you which mode you're in. You got a launch land button just like before. Now I actually, when I first started using this controller, I didn't like how it returned to center. I'm used to hobby grade joysticks like here, and it's just kind of a dead throttle stick. But as I flew it more and more, I actually came to really like it because I feel like it recovers your descent a lot better. Like one of the tricky parts to a brushed quad is if you descend too much, or if you let off power too much, it tends to, just from gravity, just to get too much inertia going downward, and the props don't have enough, or the motors don't have enough torque to recover. And you may not need to recover a lot. You may just need to level off, and it could be a little tricky. You'd kind of bottom around a lot sometimes, and sometimes you just straight up crash it. But one of the big changes to the flight characteristics on this quad is, I believe it's partly due to the return to center throttle stick and the altitude hold feature in it, but it seems like when you drop altitude, it just, as soon as you have dropped far enough and you're at where you want to be and you let off the stick, it'll just kind of almost like lock in. It's really not a feature I expected to like, but it's actually way better compared to the older Sky VIPER. So I'll show it in a video. I'll demonstrate it here in a little bit, how much better it is. But yeah, apart from that, it's I'll show you the bind process. All you got to do is plug in the battery. When these lights are flashing, it means it's ready to bind. Turn your transmitter on. Okay, and you're bound. It'll be in auto mode by default. You just hit manual if you want to go into manual. Simple as that. And then here's your, this is the lowest rate, and in high rates, it's a really twitchy drone. So definitely, if you're new to flying quadcopters, you want to keep it in rate 1 and just a more controlled, relaxed type of flying. And the drone's going to be less likely to get away from you. But yeah, so there is a point where there isn't much more I can talk about as far as this drone's improvements. It hasn't, like, I wouldn't say most of the stuff is drastic, even though I really do like its new altitude hold. It's definitely an improvement. Okay, now I want to demonstrate how much better altitude hold is now compared to the previous S1700. I'm going to be flying in manual mode here, and I can just tell you from experience, it may not be obvious from the footage here, but before, when you were in manual mode, raising and lower altitude, I mean, you could do it fine, but it was just a little bit trickier, and it just didn't feel anywhere near as crisp and locked in as it does now. Like just even just when you're just hovering around, it's just much easier to control now. But so I'm gonna kind of just raise and lower my altitude here, and every time the drone stops descending or ascending, that's just me taking my finger off of the accelerator, and it's just you go up and let off the stick and it just locks in. You go down and it just locks in every time, and just overall just makes flying a little bit easier and a little bit funner, and it just works really well for a breast quad because it doesn't have as much power, but it seems like it just feels like it's just much more responsive, and it's just a little better flying experience. Okay, so now I'm going to be doing a little bit of outdoor flying. Actually, I'm flying against a pretty strong wind here. I'm starting out in rate 1. So right now the wind is blowing directly towards me from the direction of that parking lot and those trees. Rate 1's pretty conservative. I mean, like I said, if you're new to flying quads, it's definitely the good way to go. But for me, it's just kind of like, I'm just kind of demonstrating how it handles. You can tell the angle of attack isn't very steep. So now in rate 2, you definitely get a big improvement, and it'll really jump up and go on you. But here again, I'm flying into the wind. Every time I'm flying away from me, I'm flying into the wind, and it's actually handling it pretty well. So now I push it all the way up, and now it'll really get up and go. Little flip, flip, and it'll just keep on doing them. Barrel rolls are by far my favorite trick. I'm not really much into like push button automatic tricks, but it's all you can do on this quad, and it goes. I mean, it's advertised as being capable of going up to like 25 miles an hour, which I have no way to like verify if that's true or not, but it's got plenty of kick. It doesn't like it's a typical brush quad. It doesn't have like a really strong vertical to it, but if you're just flying straight horizontally as fast as you can, it'll definitely go. And of course, like all brush quads, you got to be careful when you go full stick forward because it'll dive on you, and that's definitely not good. But if you're high enough, it doesn't really matter as much. But for some reason, all brush quads do it. If you just go full stick forward, it'll just like immediately dive on you, and you got to be careful of it. But like if I'm flying indoors or if I'm not fighting much of a wind, what I actually like to do is I'll give it a strong push forward and then just let off and let it coast for a while. And especially if I'm in FPV, because that doesn't mess up the camera angle and I can just kind of glide around. But this quad, just in general, even in a strong wind, it flies like a bird. It's just one of those quads where if it just as you get to better at flying, it just kind of it grows along with you, and you just as you get better, you can get more out of it. I mean, you can just fly it nice and easy, or you can just fly really crazy, just however you feel like flying. And I would guess probably I think I probably flew around 200 feet away here at most, and it was plenty far enough. I mean, if I can't really tell where the direction of the quad's pointed, I don't need to fly any further. But yeah, that's it, and I'm gonna jump to the FPV footage. Okay, I wanted to include a little bit of FPV footage because you usually aren't going to find it for this drone, especially. There's other Sky Vipers that have a built-in camera for recording, but this one definitely doesn't, so I just want to make clear. I have my own camera that I attach to the drone. It's the lightest camera I've got, but it still has a lot of weight. Obviously, you can tell there's a little bit of jello. I didn't really have it mounted on very tight. Um, so yeah, it's not the highest grade camera, but it's light and easy to use. It's made by Eachine, so if you ever want to pick one up, you can definitely get one off of Banggood.com and maybe even Amazon. I'm not sure, I haven't checked. But it takes pretty good footage. I mean, obviously there's some jello, but I mean, do a little flip here. And I just want to point out, I don't have a very big yard, but this drone is so quick, it kind of chews up real estate. So definitely, if you want to go flying, I would try to find, you know, about an acre to fly in. That's about like a good size for this drone because, like I said, it's quick and it covers a lot of ground really quick. Anyway, I just want to include it, just a little bit of fun footage, just to give you an idea of what you'd see if you had an FPV camera hooked up to it. Okay, and because this is kind of a starter drone, I wanted to just kind of share a little bit of what I know, and just if you're looking to buy this drone, just to give you a little bit of advice going in. First off, if you're going to buy it, don't buy it off the shelf at Walmart. At least not yet, because from what I found, if you go on Walmart.com, all these new Sky Viper drones are actually cheaper if you order them online. Where if you go into the store, I found the shelf price is actually quite a bit higher than what you'd pay if you buy it online. Batteries, I wouldn't buy the Sky Viper brand batteries. You can actually go on Amazon.com and you can order like 850 milliamp hour batteries that will fit this perfectly. And I would definitely recommend those over the brand name batteries. And motors, brush motors tend to burn out after a while. It shouldn't be like the first week you have it. If that happens, I would definitely say you have every right to take it back for a refund or an exchange. If you've gotten your good use out of it, and you know you have, you know, I don't know, a few months later, then definitely, if a motor burns out, don't be afraid to go online and just buy a new motor. Like I said earlier in the video, they're 7mm by 20mm, and what you want to make sure you do when you buy drone motors online for this quad is make sure that there's gears attached to them, because a lot of motors are sold online and they don't have gears on them. So you definitely want to make sure before you buy motors online that there is already a gear attached to the spindle or the end of the motor. A really big part of flying a quad and just learning your way around is give yourself plenty of room to fly in. Like this field is pretty optimal. The only not optimal part of it is I'm flying next to a pavilion, which could wind up being I land on the roof if something goes bad. There's some trees there that I could land in. It can be hard to get out. So definitely, if you're not very experienced, and even if you are, make sure you give yourself a lot of room to fly in. Keep obstructions to a minimum, like pavilions, and it's just generally going to save you a lot of trouble. And I've gotten drones caught up in trees before, and just generally, the more obstacles you have, the more likely you are to crash or lose signal. This drone's pretty tough, but you know, don't intentionally put yourself or put your drone in harm's way by flying near obstacles, because eventually, after enough crashes, even tough drones like this Sky Viper are going to fail on you. But that's it, like just generally for new people. If you're an intermediate flyer, this is probably all not news to you, but for people who are new to drones, you know, sometimes you make mistakes, and a lot of it's just from making the wrong decisions and not knowing any better. So hopefully, just like I said, most of all, be conscious of where you're flying it, and you never know when people are going to kind of just walk up behind you, or a car might pull up, or whatever. You know, just try to be mindful of what's going on around you. Okay, I want to wrap up this video by just making a few suggestions to the people at Sky Viper. First off, the range improvement was huge. If any of you happen to be watching this, I really appreciate it. And I'm sure a lot of Sky Viper fans and just regular drone fans will definitely appreciate the effort that you made, and it's definitely a big improvement. Um, I think my biggest suggestion, what I would like to have happen next, is I kind of feel like this generation of Sky Viper, it's kind of like a new edition of Madden, or like a refresh on a car, as opposed to like a real new model year, or a new model. And what I would like to have happen is you've got auto hover, altitude hold, and you've got manual mode. And due to some pretty clever design, you made it like just like training wheels, and you take off the training wheels and you move up to manual mode. Well, what comes after manual mode? I'm pretty sure that would be like a 6G shut off or toggle, to where we get we can do flips and rolls on our own, and not like, you know, push button tricks. Taking stabilization off. Maybe it doesn't have to be like a huge, you know, like a really really crazy amount of destabilization, but flying when you don't have stabilization on is a lot of fun. And I feel like you're at a point now where there's so many of these low cost toy grade quads around, and if you wanted to really distinguish yourself and give yourself a niche and a product that people can, you know, essentially buy off the shelf, or buy from maybe you know, like Walmart.com or Amazon, and not so much the overseas Chinese type of vendors. It'd be really great if you guys offered a destabilized flight mode, and I feel like this drone can handle it. I'm not saying that like the V2400 can do it, but I definitely feel like the Sky Viper, the Stunt Drone, sorry, the s1750, and whatever you got coming up next, I think it's light enough and it has enough power to where it could handle it, and it can be fun and controllable. So that's just my biggest suggestion. I think overall uh, this is a big improvement over the previous S1700, but I think there's kind of like, it's kind of like in a halfway point, like it's a 1.5 when it could be a 2.0 type of upgrade. So that's all I've got, and I just want to say overall that I really, excuse me, I really like this drone. It's a definite improvement. I'm just, as an intermediate flyer, I'm kind of ready for a little bit more, and I kind of enjoy flying without stabilization. So yeah, that's all I've got, and thanks for watching, and I'll have more videos soon.